Richard Linklater is one of those filmmakers most filmmakers want to be. You know, if you hate Spielberg. I feel comfortable saying that most people's introduction to Linklater's work was School of Rock in 2003, Bad News Bears in 2005, How Can We Forget, Boyhood in 2014. His career is pretty humble and long. Suffice it to say, I don't know anyone who doesn't like Richard Linklater movies.
What do I think about Richard Ledbetter? Ledbetter? I think he was a pretty good movie director for the time being in the early 90s. And then he sold out in the early 2000s with features such as School of Rock featuring Jack Black, and then The Bad News Bears. Not as good as 1976's, you know, Billy Bob Thornton hitting little kids in wheelchairs with baseball bats wasn't my favorite thing. Yeah, pretty good. More of the story is, you shouldn't sell out to Hollywood.
So even though he's not as controversial, he's definitely the same way I feel about Oliver Stone. Linklater's career is so versatile and definitely inspired some of the filmmakers we see and love today. Richard Linklater was born in Austin, Texas in 1960. His mother was a professor at Sam Houston State University, while his father worked in insurance. At the age of 7, Linklater's parents divorced, where Linklater stayed with his mother in Huntsville, Texas, from grades 4 to 11, and then finished out his high school senior year in Bel Air High School, near where his father lived. When living in Huntsville, Linklater describes it as being haunting due to the Huntsville prison that weighs on the town. He said that the townspeople either worked there, or if they didn't, it would still be a topic of discussion amongst the town folks. He grew up around that prison, and parked cars at the prison rodeo every Sunday in October. His stepfather was a prison guard, and his friend's parents were held hostage in the 1974 prison siege. The prison escapes didn't worry Linklater, since most of the convicts would leave town immediately. But he heard many exciting stories as a kid of convicts breaking out and doing the unimaginable to be free. During grades 9 through 11, Linklater was a football player at his high school, and even played for Joe Clements as a backup quarterback in the top football team of the state of Texas. In his new school in Bel Air, Linklater quit football to do baseball. Linklater always felt he was ahead of his friends, culturally or intellectually. His grandmother took him to museums and symphonies, and they watched many films. As a teenager, he won the Scholastic Art and Writing Award, won by many famous artists and writers such as Andy Warhol, Truman Capote, Stephen King, and Sylvia Plath. After graduation, Linklater got a baseball scholarship to attend the Sam Houston University in Huntsville. As he got older, he worked as an offshore oil worker for about 2.5 years, and he saw the city of Houston in a much more adult perspective, through the industrial point of view. It was during this point in his life where he was interested in film and spent most of his off days at the theaters in the city. Film became Linklater's life, and everything else just felt like a void. Linklater was falling into a more solitary phase in his young adulthood. Linklater considers himself to be self-taught.
I remember feeling like everything outside my life that wasn't cinema was kind of this void, you know, relationships, family connections, everything. It was probably that necessary period where you have to sort of separate yourself from everything you knew before, or as you sort of define yourself as an adult. I have a lot of sympathy for people in their 20s who are sort of wanting to do something different or discover what they're most passionate about or live a life of purpose, or that, you know, they feel like what they're doing with their time is valuable to themselves or their community. You know, if you just go straight to business school and get a job and get married, you know, there's always, that's the typical track, but there's always going to be people who, you know, are looking for something else, or, you know, they're having a lengthy existential crisis about what anything means. And I don't know, I've always had a soft spot for that, because that was really me. I mean, although I have to say, cinema was the thing that saved me, or that I was always into from age 20 on. I had that kind of focus. What engaged me was film, which is a great thing to fill up your entire life because it encompasses everything. I often joke when people ask if I went to film school, I say, I went to the Stanley Kubrick Film School, which means you just buy a camera and you learn how to use it and you start making movies, and that's as good as anything else. I mean, I lived near the University of Texas Film School. I had a lot of friends who went to school there, and I would sit in on classes. I'd go to student film. I was kind of I felt I had some connection there, even though I was never enrolled. I'd go to student short screenings and certainly watched thousands of films on campus.
Linklater saved up enough money to have a Super 8 camera, a projector, editing equipment, and moved to Austin, Texas. In 1985, Linklater founded with his cinematographer, Lee Daniel, the Austin Film Society. The nonprofit exhibits independent, experimental, foreign, and non-mainstream films.
Play music, that's pretty stupid, huh? Ask me a question. Where do you work? I work at McDonald's, and this is my new album, Hi, How Are You? Yeah? And it's an old album, but if you get a chance, please listen to it. Okay, thanks. Where are we going to drop the bomb? I hope you like it.
Austin Film Society went from exhibiting these films to fostering independent filmmaking in Texas, and has helped build the film industry in Texas. Many notable people that are on the AFS board are Mike Judge, Robert Rodriguez, Charles Burnett, Del Toro, and Tarantino. During this time, Linklater made a series of short films to find his voice in film. It was then he finished his first feature in 1988 called It's Impossible to Learn to Plow by Reading Books. He shot it using his Super 8, and took a year to shoot, and then another year to edit. Slacker came out in 1990, made for $23,000. The film was written, directed, and first starring Richard Linklater himself, and follows 100 characters in the span of 24 hours. The film was shot in the year of 1989, with a 16mm Arriflex on location in Houston, Texas. In 1991, Slacker was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize at the Sundance Film Festival. It's known that Slacker had a huge impact in independent cinema in the 1990s, often referred to as the starting point of the 90s. You have filmmakers like Kevin Smith, who was influenced by Slacker and was inspired to make Clerks in 1994. After the success of Slacker, he became a cult figure in the independent film world, and went on to do Dazed and Confused in 1993. Heavily based on his childhood in Huntsville, Texas. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Linklater to work on this first big studio production.
91, a film of mine, Slacker, came out and became kind of an independent success of that year. A little $23,000 film from nowhere, shot on 16mm, kind of becomes a minor cult film.
Rick had this idea to do an American Graffiti for the 70s.
I just found myself in this great position of have kind of cool idea that they might take, and studio kind of interested. It was that one little window you're occasionally given in this lifetime where things, hook up.
And I said, we'd like to fly you out to LA and talk about this American Graffiti idea you have.
I'd had a little lunch with Jim right before, and he was talking about, I'm looking forward to hearing your pitch. He kept saying the word pitch, and I'm like, am I supposed to do something like pitch? What is that? I remember just thinking this is that moment where your whole life hangs in a balance. So I remember just talking. I didn't jump up on the desk like something out of the Player where you go, first shot, close up of. I just started talking about the movie and the characters and the tone of it.
It was then they read the script where there was no real conflict, only small ones as the film goes on, and it's getting an R rating for language but no nudity. The studio felt uneasy about producing the film, but it eventually made its way into production.
His line, when it's all over, no one remembers who won or lost. All the best lines in Dazed were kind of in the margins.
We worked quite a while. We worked 5 or 6 months on this script. Then it got to be this point that we were going to make the movie. Of course, at that point, we got into that whole situation with Universal about whether they really wanted to make the movie or not, and they didn't think it was funny enough, and we were going to get an R rating for language, but there wasn't any naked girls or anything like that in it.
It was R-rated not for anything gratuitous, not for anything even obvious, just because life was R-rated.
Jim and Sean did a good job of kind of forcing this film into production.
Dazed and Confused was also the breakout film for Texas native Matthew McConaughey, who was discovered by Don Phillips, the same casting director that discovered Sean Penn in Fast Times.
The way these things work out, and the film was totally open for this, but there's Don sitting in a bar later at night. I guess he had let the bartender know what he was doing in town.
And he found out that I had cast Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
few minutes later, he's sitting there having a conversation with Matthew McConaughey, a film student, you know, who's a junior in college, who just goes over and starts talking to him.
And we did not talk at all about movies. We didn't talk about anything but golf and girls and booze. Anyway, we just had ourselves a good old boys kind of time. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. I went, hey. I said, there's this little part. I remember even going like this to you. I said, there's this little part called Waterson.
And then you said, you ever done any acting?
Yeah.
I was like, it was in a Miller Lite commercial.
At first, Linklater believed McConaughey was too pretty for the role, but sure enough, they wrote him in. To prepare the actors for their roles, Linklater was very militant on making the film convincing that everyone lived in the 70s. He would assign different actors, different artists from the 70s by making mixtapes for the actors, and ask them to listen to only 70s music while they were in production.
Sent us a package of how he expected us to be and what he wanted, and I thought it was the perfect thing. I think every director should do that, because he really told each person what he needed and wanted from them. I came there just knowing.
I got this letter from Rick before the movie started. He said, if the finished product of the movie is as written, it will be a massive underachievement.
Growing up being somebody who probably doesn't make a lot of money.
He probably fears his old man.
What does Jody hate? Violence.
He just thinks about smoking marijuana.
They actually knew what beat that they had to take, you know, and the old conductor over here had given them the right beats.
Listen, I give them like who they're listening to,
right.
like, their taste. You know, I say you're a Ted Nugent man and ZZ Top, you know, Southern rock with a little heavy metal.
The film underwent some minor production problems between Linklater and the producers. Linklater was very loose with his filmmaking style and didn't care about how much profanity was used or didn't respond to the producer notes as much as the producers would have liked.
Is we didn't have a lot of rehearsal time before we started the movie. So he was doing that every morning, every day on the set. And it would eat up a huge amount of the shoot day. And we would often get to lunch and not have one setup. If I worked and got as stressed out on every movie the way I did on Dazed and Confused, I would have had a heart attack years ago. We went and saw Daly's, and it was the scene where they pour paint over Ben's head. And just 2 days before, I had talked to Ben and said, can you please tone down the language? And he said, he would.
I'm like, Jim's talking to you? When at the hotel? Where's he telling you not to cuss? You know, who is my co-director, my invisible co-director going behind my back telling the actors not to cuss?
I go on the set. Now, Ben's a big guy. I grab Ben, I push him against a pole. I said, don't you fucking listen? And he was like, you can't say cocksucker. You can't say cocksucker. And he goes like, what are you talking about? I said, I just watched Dailies and you're using cocksucker this, cocksucker that.
I said, well, talk to Rick. I mean, you know, this is what we thought. And I was like, and for me, I think it's good.
He's like, I can't believe you would do that. I'm like, what are you talking about? You used the word cocksucker. I said, so? I mean, it's like, that's worse than fuck. I'm like, it is?
Jim calls me from his cell phone on the street in Austin and says, I just slammed my fist into a phone pole. My knuckles are bleeding.
I blew open one knuckle, and I still have the scar on it.
And I remember I said, Jim, it's better than hitting Rick.
Linklater was very keen on collaborating with the actors, allowing them to write lines in for the film, and even scenes. When the film was finished, the first cut was around 2 hours and 45 minutes, and a few scenes had to be cut, specifically a scene where Parker Posey and Joey Lauren Adams, who were very close friends on the set,
You know, had bonded so much personally that they were like, well, where's our scene? What's up? And I'm like, you know, you're together at all these things, but yeah, you're right. And they said, well, we're gonna write a scene.
So we wanted to do a scene, and we wanted to do a scene that wasn't about boys or nail polish or, you know, the things that men
or serious bonding. We wanted like a hangout, really natural
conversation, like girls, you know, really have conversations, believe it or not.
And they came back with, oh, we got a scene. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna shoot that scene. You know, we just kind of went over it. I didn't, you know, it was their scene. And that drives the production crazy. It's like, a scene that's not even in the script, we're gonna spend time shooting. So we had to kind of sneak it into the production.
Last weekend she went roller skating with that group she's in.
Parents without plans.
Parents without partners.
Parents without plans.
And it was in the movie for the longest time. It survived many cuts. But the movie, because it had this sort of loose style, it was too long to begin with. So I had like a 2-hour and 45-minute, like, first cut.
We hope that makes it.
We hope it makes it, yeah.
Oh, it was painful. It was really painful to drop that scene from the movie.
Matthew's father died in the middle of shooting, and he went back for the funeral, and I think it was your mom who said your dad would have liked you to come back and go back to work. So Rick said, I'll never forget as long as I live, Rick said, well, when he comes back, I got a few more things for him to do. and he came back, and it ended all the way to the very end.
Well, one of them was the scene on the football field. I felt that the movie was building to some kind of apex, but it wasn't in the script. Like, well, what happens on the football field? They talk shit, but that's not what the movie's really about. What's the core? What can you, like, tell Pink, or, you know, like, if it's his kind of what's going on in his mind that night?
Man, it's the same bullshit they tried to pull in my day. You know, if it ain't that piece of paper, some other choice they're gonna try and make for you. You gotta do what Randall Pink Floyd wants to do, man. And let me tell you this. The older you do get, the more rules are gonna try to get you to follow. You just gotta keep living, man. L-I-V-I-N.
You know, I think that's just a great moment on the field when you sort of empower him, but, you know, you sort of...
I didn't know this, but Matthew just said it about an hour ago. What inspired that line, Rick, was his father.
I was shooting last night until, geez, I guess like maybe 1 or 2. I don't really remember. And Thursday's my last day. Saturday was officially my last day, but we're doing pickups right now. And I'm gonna have to go to school and then like work, and I don't know how this is all gonna work out. It's the best summer I've ever had in my entire life, and it's over.
One day in Philadelphia in 1989, Linklater met a woman at a toy shop where they quickly connected and talked for hours, conversing about intellectual ideas about the world, men and women, and discovering a part of themselves that wasn't present before meeting each other. Linklater teamed up with his female co-writer, Kim Creason, who had a smaller role in Slacker and Dazed and Confused, to help him write a dialogue-heavy script about men and women, talking in a span of nearly a whole day in a foreign land. They wrote the script in 11 days, where Linklater spent 9 months casting, searching for the perfect actors for the 2 characters in the film. When Linklater first met Ethan Hawke, he believed he was too young for the role, but considered him after watching a New York play he was in. Linklater met Julie Delpy and liked her immediately and casted both of them for the main roles. Delpy and Hawke did a lot of work on the script, with rewriting and making it more natural for them. The script really wasn't romantic originally, but more so talking, and the 2 actors created this legendary romance in the film for the 1990s, but were not credited in the co-writing until the sequels. The most surprising part is that the film doesn't feel like it's heavy on the script, but more so improv, which is untrue. Linklater filmed everything, with the actors reading their lines. No improv. The film went on to premiere at Cannes Film Festival and won the Silver Bear at Berlin for Best Director. In 2010, Linklater had learned that the woman he had met that inspired the film died in a motor vehicle accident before shooting Before Sunrise. You know, in Suburbia, everyone's pretty upset that they just hang out at the same corner store every weekend and just talk shit about the people who leave and the people who stay. That's kind of how Miami feels. People here suck. Unless you're rich, you don't have any fun. Whoever leaves, I'm immediately jealous of them, even if it's someplace shitty like LA. Going back to his Slacker roots, Suburbia came out in 1996, written by Eric Boguson, who also wrote and directed Oliver Stone's Talk Radio, based on Boguson's real experiences in Woburn, Massachusetts.
Christ, nothing makes a difference in the first fucking place. Nothing ever changes, man. 50 years from now, we're all gonna be dead, and there'll be new people standing here, drinking beer, eating pizza, bitching and moaning about the price of Oreos, and they won't even know we were ever here. And then 50 years after that, those suckers will be dust and bones, and there'll be all these generations of suckers trying to figure out what the fuck they're doing on this fucking planet, and they'll all be full of shit. It's all so fucking futile.
If it's all so fucking futile, what the fuck are you so fucking upset about, fuckhead?
because I'm alienated.
The film was set at a convenience store where young adults in the suburbs spent most of their nights loosely talking about their past, present, and futures, while also talking shit about other people they used to know. The film didn't do well at the box office, but earned a low-key following, including myself, who loves this film.
Richard Linklater, who made Slacker, Dazed and Confused, and Before Sunrise, and he has a very good sense of his own generation, how and what they talk about. Certainly the subject matter of knocking the suburbs is not new, but the movie Suburbia works because of Linklater's direction and the script, the tough script by Eric Bogosian, so dead on that the film plays like an all-night howl of despair. I do recommend Suburbia.
So do I, and I love Bogosian's script touches, such as the speeches the Pakistani store owner has, where he predicts what's going to happen to him in 2 years and what's going to happen to them in 2 years.
That's a real powerful put-down.
Devastating. And the performances are all good. Most of the actors are fairly unfamiliar. Parker Posey is turning up a lot these days.
In independent films.
She's beginning to grow on me. I liked her in this film. But they work together so that even though we realize at some point this began in life as a stage play, nevertheless, it does seem like a real corner where these guys really do hang out.
I want to comment on that. If I hadn't seen Bogosian's credit at in the film, I would not necessarily have known it began as a stage play. It feels real, and that's where the director comes in, and maybe Bogosian made some alterations. I never saw the play. But, that's rarely happening, to see a play transformed to film and be this natural. It's a real good work.
It's a real good film.
After that was Newton Boys in 1998, about a group of Texan gangsters starring Matthew McConaughey and Ethan Hawke. The film also bombed. Hey, what do you think about Richard Linklater?
Oh, man. I like him, but Richard Linklater, I guess you've been dreaming a while. It's okay though. The people are a complicated thing. Basically, everybody looks for each other, and what they're looking for is something useful in you. They want to use you for their own purposes. But it's up to you to determine how you want to be used, so everything's okay. I know you've been dreaming a long time, but trust me, I'm just here to tell you, you can go at your own speed. There's nothing wrong with this. And if you have trouble waking up, try to find me again.
It was time for something different in Linklater's career. He already had Waking Life as an idea before, but it never quite worked as a live-action, realistic-looking film.
Do you ever have those dreams that are just completely real? I mean, they're so vivid, it's just like completely real. The premise for this whole book was that every thought you have creates its own reality. It's like every choice or decision you make, the thing you choose not to do fractions off and becomes its own reality, and just goes on from there. And another example would be like back there at the bus station, as I got off the bus, the thought crossed my mind, just for a second about not taking a cab at all, but, maybe walking or bumming a ride or something like that. I'm kind of broke right now, I should have done that probably. But just because that thought crossed my mind, there now exists at this very second a whole nother reality where I'm at the bus station, and you're probably giving someone else a ride.
He quotes, "I think to make a realistic film about unreality. A film had to be realistic unreality. Then came rotoscoping, a technique animators use by overlaying live-action footage with animation that roughly approximates the images actually filmed. This wasn't new. 1970s filmmaker Ralph Bakshi used this technique for films like Cool World. Experimental silent filmmaker Max Fleischer invented the rotoscoping technique in a film in 1917. Due to Linklater having various artists on board of the film, the feel and look of the film gradually changes and becomes stranger as the film goes on to achieve a more surreal, shifting dreamscape. The process of all of this was designed by Bob Sebastian. Rotoscoping in Waking Life was done by using Apple Macintosh computers by a custom-made rotoscoping program. The film stars Wiley Wiggins from Dazed and Confused, going through his lucid dream state. The film is immersed in philosophical discussions and has references to other Linklater characters, such as the Before trilogy couple, Linklater himself playing at the pinball machine, another reference he calls back to Slacker, controversial Texas native Alex Jones.
Come on over here. Come on over here.
Self-destructive man feels completely alienated, utterly alone. He's an
This rat maze. We should not submit to dehumanization. I don't know about you, but I'm concerned with what's happening in this world. I'm concerned with the structure. I'm concerned with the systems of control, those that control my life and those that seek to control it even more.
Following Waking Life was taped in 2001, based on the play by Steven Belber. It's a camcorder drama that follows three old high school friends meeting in a Michigan hotel to dissect past memories from the past. The film plays in real time and stars Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke, both married at the time, and Robert Sean Leonard. The film still holds good reviews to this day. Produced by Paramount Studios, School of Rock screenwriter Mike White was inspired by Langley School's music project, basically a collection of recordings of children singing pop hits like David Bowie and Paul McCartney, and has become a cult hit labeled as outsider music. The script was passed around at Hollywood looking for a director, and it landed on Richard Linklater, an unlikely person to direct a commercial kids film. And Linklater even passed, saying, "Nah." Even Jack Black thought Linklater wasn't suited to direct the film, but sure enough, producer Scott Rudin did not accept Linklater's pass. Linklater quotes, "I got a call saying, 'Well, Scott Rudin, the producer, isn't accepting your pass.' He was just sure I was the right guy to pull this off, and I'm like, well, that's interesting, you're not just going to go through the Rolodex." So, it was huge. Different thing for me to come aboard. The film came out in 2003 and did immensely well at the box office, and has brought Linklater up to higher status in Hollywood. Linklater made his way back to Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy in his 2004 film Before Sunset, a sequel to Before Sunrise. The two actors now earning their co-writer credits, it follows the same structure as the first film, except it's 9 years later in Paris. The couple reunite by coincidence and catch up with their different lives. After filming Before Sunrise, the three were already talking about a sequel to the film, and Linklater originally wanted it to be filmed in 4 locations with a bigger budget, but this obviously didn't happen and the concept remained the same. The film was notably inspired by Hawke's divorce by Uma Thurman, and the principal photography took about 15 days. It took place in real time in Paris, and Julie Delpy also made original music for the film's soundtrack.
Much more than anyone I've met before. One single night with you, little Jessie, is worth 1,000 with anybody.
Most people really enjoy this film over the original due to the characters being much older and wiser. And probably the worst film in Linklater's filmography, debatable, is his remake of Bad News Bears in 2005, starring Billy Bob Thornton and Greg Kinnear. It's the closest film we have to a Linklater sports film besides Everybody Wants Some, but it almost earned all its money back from the box office, and the reviews were mostly mixed, and just feels like a result of a successful blockbuster of School of Rock, or that he was just staying busy for a different project he was working on before. Introducing Scanner Darkly. Originally, Linklater wanted to adapt a Philip K. Dick's Ubik, but couldn't obtain the rights. After School of Rock, Linklater wanted to make Scanner Darkly next, but felt it was important for him to receive the approval from Philip K. Dick's estate. K. Dick's 2 daughters were not happy with the cartoonish approach to the film, but soon after reading Linklater's screenplay for the film, they talked it out. Linklater said that the challenge was to capture the humor and exuberance of the book, but not let go of the sad and tragic. He wanted the film to be under $10 million to keep the creative control and remain faithful to the book. He says Scanner Darkly was about these guys. What they were all doing in their alternative world and what's going through their mind is what's keeping the story moving. The film stars Keanu Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., Rory Cochran, Woody Harrelson, and Winona Ryder. And Alex Jones appears in the film. Fun fact, I had no idea Winona Ryder's godfather was Timothy Leary. I found this out because that was her connection to the story, since Philip K. Dick and Timothy Leary were acquainted in the past. The film revolves around an undercover cop in the future and becomes involved with a new drug, where he eventually loses identity as a result. Rehearsals took place in Austin, Texas. Linklater went over the script with the actors and had their input on the script. To prepare for the roles, Cochran came up with his character 5 minutes before going on the elevator to work. Robert Downey Jr. memorized lines by writing it all out in a run-on sentence, studied them, and converted them into acronyms.
Bad. Well, it doesn't matter what I think. I kind of have to tip my hat to any entity that could bring so much integrity to evil.
Keanu relied on the book by marking down each scene in the screenplay by the corresponding page in the book. Filming began in May of 2004 and lasted 6 weeks. Cinematographer Shane Kelly composed his shots carefully and used a color palette with the animators in mind. Sometimes the actors forgot they were even going to be animated when they were filming, and Robert Downey Jr. even said he completely forgot that the scene would be later animated, as he worked through several takes in order to produce the smoke ring and Barris's face in the close-up shot. After filming was done, the animators took 18 months to animate the film. When Linklater went on to direct Bad News Bears, his team of local animators were split into 5 teams, but the teams lacked communication, and as a result, barely anything was even done. And the animation style Linklater wanted wasn't even being implemented, even telling the lead animator that Keanu Reeves' beard looks like Fred Flintstone. After 2 months, animators were still learning how to use the software, and overall the film was progressing very slowly, which frustrated Linklater. The film was supposed to be out by September 2005, but got pushed back due to the new animation team coming into production. Warner Brother Pictures asked for the status of the film, which that there were no finished sequences. Some animators had to work 18-hour days for 2 weeks so that they could produce a trailer for the film. The animators were immensely behind on their 6-month schedule and requested for the film to be pushed back even more for the budget to raise, which caused tension with the production team in the studio. In January of 2005, producer of the film, Tommy Pallotta, snuck into the animation studio while the core team was strategizing at a local cafe, and Pallotta changed the locks of the studio and seized their workstations by replacing them with 2 local artists, Jason Archer and Paul Beck, who he felt would bring a more commercial attitude to the film. The original team received credit in the film as additional animation, even though they worked the first 6 months designing the general look of the film. Sources say that they weren't trying to ruin the art, they just wanted to make it better and reach deadline. At this point, the studio gave Linklater 6 months to complete the film, but didn't finish until 15 months later. Linklater expressed that the animation process went by very slowly, with little progress, and eventually the film came out next to Cars and Pirates of the Caribbean. Surprisingly though, the film almost earned its budget back, but $1 million short. After Scanner Darkly, Linklater kept busy over the years, but mostly worked among studio budget films such as 2008 Me and Orson Welles, Burning in 2011, and eventually dropped Before Midnight in 2013, the 3rd installment to his Before trilogy, which received the nomination for Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards. Let's go back to 2002, where Linklater began working on an untitled film in Houston, Texas. Linklater wanted to assemble the cast and crew annually for the next 12 years for this untitled film, which is called Boyhood.
The grid of 1 through 12, those grades you kind of have to go to. That's kind of what you're sentenced to from childhood. You're going to be in school through 12th grade. You're going to live in your parents' house.
Linklater didn't need a completed script, but began his casting process. The main role went to a local boy named Eller Holtran, his sister being Linklater's daughter, Laura Lee.
Well, Waking Life was cool, but the animation was cool, but well, it was kind of boring.
The mother is Patricia Arquette, and the father was none other than Ethan Hawke. None of the actors could actually sign on to this particular role due to a law called the De Havilland Law, which doesn't allow contracted employees to work for someone for 11 years. Linklater even told Ethan Hawke that if he died, that Hawke would have to finish the film. The way Linklater would approach directing the actors was to give them plot points and the ending, including the final shot. The actors contributed to the script to give it more experience or life, such as the father being inspired by Linklater's and Hawke's dad. Patricia Arquette's character was based on her mother. The film feels immensely personal and relatable for anyone. Small moments such as Ethan Hawke giving his fictional son the gift of the Black Album on his 15th birthday, which in real life Ethan Hawke compiled individual Beatles songs on a CD calling it the Black Album 2, and gave it to his daughter Maya to help deal with the divorce between him and Uma Thurman. Funny too that during the span of 12 years, both Hawke and Arquette actually experienced divorces, remarriage, and had another child. Of course, Linklater also references Slacker in Boyhood by incorporating cameo characters and situations. Linklater during production would call this film Boyhood, but eventually changed it to 12 years since the film took 12 years to shoot. But that had to change since 12 Years a Slave came out the same year, so the film was changed back to Boyhood. The film was nominated for many categories, but won only one Oscar for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. The film would go on to be a time capsule film of the early 2000s, and down to one of the best films ever to be made in recent years. After Boyhood, and like many other projects, Richard Linklater keeps himself busy. Now a household name, he's constantly working with the film and TV. His latest film was in 2019 with Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and currently working on another long-term project called Merrily We Roll Along, which will be filmed in the course of 20 years, its release date being 2040. Richard Linklater's early work was groundbreaking for its time and paved the way to filmmakers who either mimicked his style or felt inspired to be a self-taught filmmaker themselves. I really have to admire that he's going to keep working, even with a film that's going to take 20 years to make. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys are all doing well. I know it's been a while. Super busy, but I'm very excited to make more essays and try to change up this style I've been trying to change up for a while. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.